Harvey Weinstein, once a titan of the film industry, epitomized the power and influence that Hollywood's elite could wield over aspiring artists, particularly women. As co-founder of Miramax and later the Weinstein Company, he played an instrumental role in producing and distributing some of the most iconic films of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, including Pulp Fiction, Shakespeare in Love, and The English Patient. These films not only brought him immense wealth and critical acclaim, but also cemented his position as a ruthless yet revered mogul in Hollywood. However, behind the glitz and glamour of red carpets and Oscar speeches, a much darker truth was taking shape. In 2017, the world was shaken by a series of investigative reports that exposed Weinstein as a serial abuser who had used his position of power to sexually harass, assault, and manipulate women for decades. Over 80 women came forward, from global stars like Ashley Judd, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Angelina Jolie, to lesser-known actresses, all recounting eerily similar stories of hotel room meetings, coercive propositions, and in many cases, violent sexual encounters disguised as professional opportunities. The revelations were staggering, not only for their sheer volume, but for the chilling abuse of authority that had protected him for so long. These disclosures fueled a global reckoning, igniting the Me Too movement and shifting the cultural narrative from silence to outspoken resistance against sexual misconduct. Weinstein's initial denials and claims of consensual relationships were quickly overshadowed by the growing number of detailed, heartbreaking testimonies that left little room for doubt. His downfall became a symbol of the deep-rooted exploitation in the entertainment industry and a catalyst for change that extended far beyond Hollywood. The scandal didn't just end a powerful man's career, it exposed a system that for too long had enabled abuse, forcing an entire industry to confront its complicity and marking the beginning of a new era where survivors were finally being heard. The first signs of Harvey Weinstein's abusive behavior had begun to surface long before the explosive reports of 2017, but it was only then that the full scope of his actions came to light. Many of the women who eventually stepped forward had endured years of silence, weighed down by fear, shame, and the overwhelming influence Weinstein wielded in Hollywood. As a powerful gatekeeper to fame and opportunity, his position as a kingmaker left few brave enough to challenge him, even as rumors of his misconduct echoed quietly through industry corridors. In 1997, Ashley Judd became one of the earliest voices to share her unsettling encounter with Weinstein, an incident involving a hotel room meeting where he allegedly asked her for a massage and propositioned her under the guise of business. Though not labeled as assault at the time, Judd's account revealed the manipulative, coercive patterns that would later become disturbingly familiar. Her story, like so many others, initially went unnoticed in a culture that protected powerful men and punished those who spoke out. Despite mounting whispers, Weinstein's financial power and his ability to make or break careers provided him a nearly impenetrable shield from consequences. Actresses who rejected him often faced retaliation, finding themselves mysteriously removed from projects or blacklisted from future opportunity. This method of control wasn't accidental. It was a calculated system of silence, where isolated meetings turned into traps cloaked as professional discussions. It wasn't until 2017 that the silence was finally shattered. Investigative journalists Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey of the New York Times, alongside Ronan Farrow of the New Yorker, conducted months of in-depth reporting, gathering testimonies, records, and confronting the layers of secrecy that had kept Weinstein protected for so long. Farrow's reporting was especially groundbreaking as he uncovered how Weinstein had used legal settlements, non-disclosure agreements, and even intimidation to suppress the truth. What emerged was a horrifying portrait of a man who had not only abused women, but had built an entire system to ensure they stayed quiet. Some of Hollywood's most prominent names, including Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie, bravely stepped forward with their own experiences. Paltrow revealed an incident from the mid-1990s when Weinstein had made unwanted advances toward her just as her career was taking off. She confided in her then-partner, Brad Pitt, who later confronted Weinstein directly. Jolie, too, spoke of harassment during the production of Playing by Heart and made a decision never to work with him again. Their courage inspired a wave of women to break their silence, exposing not just a predator, but a long-standing culture of abuse and complicity. As more women, actresses, assistants, employees, even hotel staff came forward, a chillingly consistent pattern of coercion, harassment, and assault emerged. Many recounted meetings in hotel rooms that escalated into terrifying confrontation. Some, like model and actress Ambra Batalana Gutierrez, had even reported him to the police. In 2015, Gutierrez had recorded audio of Weinstein admitting inappropriate behavior, yet despite the damning evidence, no charges were filed, and her case was quietly dismissed. The weight of these stories revealed that Weinstein's actions were not isolated missteps, but part of a calculated and sustained abuse of power spanning decades. For the survivors, the unmasking of Weinstein became more than just the end of a predator's reign. It became the start of collective healing. The Me Too movement, already gaining traction, was galvanized by these revelations. What was once a background murmur of unspoken pain became a thunderous global demand for justice. The walls that had protected men like Weinstein for so long finally began to crumble, giving voice to the silenced and reshaping the way the world views power, accountability, and the cost of complicity. As the revelations about Harvey Weinstein's long history of abuse came to light, it became clear that his legal reckoning would be as intricate and far-reaching as the accusations against him. For years, Weinstein had lived above consequence, protected by his immense wealth, powerful legal team, and the entertainment industry's culture of silence. But as survivor after survivor stepped forward, the pressure mounted, not just to hold one man accountable, but to confront a system that had enabled his behavior for decades. In 2018, Weinstein was arrested in New York on charges of sexual assault, marking the beginning of a criminal process that would test the justice system's willingness to confront power and privilege. Two women, Miriam Haley and Lucia Evans, formed the core of the charges. Haley accused him of raping her in a hotel room in 2006, while Evans alleged he had forced her into a non-consensual sexual act in 2004. Though these charges were only a fraction of the allegations against him, they represented the starting point for a case that would come to define a cultural era. The New York trial began in January 2020 and quickly became a media and legal spectacle. It was viewed not only as a battle over the specifics of Weinstein's crimes, but as a broader symbol of the Me Too movement and its power to challenge the untouchable. Weinstein's defense team, led by attorney Donna Rotunno, aggressively sought to undermine the credibility of the women who accused him. Their strategy was to reframe the encounters as consensual, focusing on messages, interactions, and continued contact between Weinstein and some of the women following the alleged assaults. The defense leaned heavily on the blurred lines between personal and professional relationships in Hollywood, attempting to portray Weinstein as a flawed man, not a criminal predator. But the prosecution countered with powerful testimony from multiple women, including actress Annabella Sciorra, who described a violent rape by Weinstein in the 1990s. Her testimony was central to establishing a pattern of behavior that transcended isolated incidents. Despite the passage of time and the legal challenges in using such historic testimony, Sciorra's courage and clarity played a key role in reinforcing the prosecution's argument that Weinstein's actions were predatory, deliberate, and rooted in the abuse of power. In February 2020, Harvey Weinstein was found guilty of third-degree rape and first-degree criminal sexual act. The verdict sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. For the first time, a powerful entertainment executive had been convicted in a court of law for the kinds of abuses that had long been whispered about but rarely addressed. The conviction was hailed as a landmark victory for the women who had come forward and for survivors everywhere, suggesting that the culture of complicity and silence might finally be starting to fracture. But the legal story was far from over. Weinstein faced numerous other allegations across the country, including charges in Los Angeles tied to assaults involving several other women, such as actress Jennifer Siebel Newsom. In 2020, he was extradited to California to face these new charges, reigniting the legal process and signaling that justice might still be possible, even beyond the New York case. Weinstein's legal team remained unrelenting, continuing to employ aggressive tactics to discredit witnesses and delay proceedings. But the tide of public opinion and legal momentum continued to turn against him. In parallel to the criminal proceedings, Weinstein was also the subject of numerous civil lawsuits. Many of these were settled out of court, often involving financial compensation and non-disclosure agreements. But for the victims, money was never the point. It was about justice, about having their truths acknowledged in public, and about preventing others from suffering the same fate. Still, the legal system remained imperfect. In 2024, Weinstein's conviction in New York was overturned on appeal. The court ruled that the jury had been improperly exposed to testimonies from women whose allegations were not part of the formal charges, and this, they argued, could have prejudiced the jury's decision. The reversal stunned many, sparking outrage and deep disappointment among survivors who had waited years to see justice served. It was a painful reminder of how fragile legal victories can be, even in cases where the evidence and public outcry seem overwhelming. Yet the fight did not end there. The overturned conviction cleared the path for a retrial, now scheduled for 2025. This new trial offers survivors another opportunity to hold Weinstein accountable, to reaffirm their voices, and to challenge a system that so often fails them. The case has come to symbolize not just one man's fall from grace, but the broader struggles survivors face when seeking justice through legal systems designed to protect the powerful. The lengthy proceedings, public attacks on credibility, and emotional toll have re-traumatized many of the women involved, yet they persist, driven by the belief that truth matters and that even the most powerful men must answer for their actions. Harvey Weinstein's story is no longer just his own. It is a mirror held up to society, exposing how power, silence, and complicity intertwine. And while the final chapter has yet to be written, the courage of those who spoke out has already transformed the cultural landscape, creating space for accountability, healing, and long-overdue justice. The rise and eventual exposure of Harvey Weinstein's scandal sent shockwaves through not only Hollywood, but the entire global conversation around power, abuse, and accountability. Once hailed as a visionary producer behind countless award-winning films, Weinstein had long held a reputation as a kingmaker in the entertainment world, someone who could launch careers or destroy them with a single word. But beneath the glittering surface of fame and success lay a dark and disturbing reality. His downfall became the catalyst for a profound cultural reckoning, tearing away the illusion of a glamorous and morally neutral Hollywood and revealing a deeply rooted system of manipulation, exploitation, and silence. Before the public eruption of the Me Too movement, sexual misconduct was something many in the industry whispered about, feared privately, and tolerated out of survival. Young women, desperate for a breakthrough, were often faced with impossible choices. Submit to the inappropriate advances of powerful men like Weinstein, or risk being blacklisted from an industry that demanded compliance in exchange for opportunity. The unspoken rules were clear, and for years, Weinstein operated freely within them, insulated by wealth, influence, and an army of enablers who looked the other way. The moment the stories about Weinstein broke in 2017, the effect was immediate and irreversible. Activist Tarana Burke's Me Too movement, which had existed quietly since 2006, suddenly found a global stage. Social media became a vessel for survivors to speak out, share their truths, and find solidarity. The Me Too movement trended worldwide, and the collective voice of women and men from all walks of life surged forward with a power that could no longer be ignored. It was clear that Weinstein was not just a monster in isolation, but part of a broader system that allowed such behavior to thrive. Hollywood, for all its outrage, was forced to confront its own complicity. Directors, producers, actors, and executives expressed public shock, but many admitted in private interviews that they had long known or heard rumors about Weinstein's misconduct. Some confessed to turning a blind eye, afraid of jeopardizing their own positions or hoping someone else would take the risk of speaking up. Weinstein's behavior had been an open secret, buried under layers of fear, silence, and the unwritten rules that governed the industry. As more women came forward, the cracks in Hollywood's foundation became impossible to ignore. The culture that had normalized the casting couch as a dirty but accepted reality began to unravel. Public figures like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were scrutinized for their past associations and alleged complicity in downplaying or ignoring Weinstein's behavior. The backlash didn't stop with Weinstein. It spread like wildfire, exposing other high-profile abusers such as Kevin Spacey and Louis C.K., and ushering in a wave of resignations, investigations, and overdue accountability. The conversation around sexual harassment was no longer relegated to private circles. It was on the front pages, the red carpets, and in boardrooms across the globe. In response, entertainment companies began re-evaluating their internal cultures. New policies were implemented, HR departments were scrutinized, and entire corporate structures were questioned. It became clear that silence would no longer be an option, and many companies began cutting ties with those accused of misconduct, regardless of their status or success. But the impact of Weinstein's fall wasn't just reactive. It sparked a revolution in how women approached power in Hollywood. No longer content with being passive recipients of opportunity, more women began taking control behind the scenes as directors, producers, and writers. Conversations around pay equity, representation, and creative ownership grew louder, and slowly but surely the industry began to shift. More female-led films were greenlit, more inclusive stories were told, and the idea of who gets to tell the story became a central issue. Still, even with the progress made, many recognized that systemic change would not happen overnight. The deeply entrenched power dynamics that had enabled men like Weinstein to flourish didn't vanish with a few convictions. Survivors continued to struggle for justice in a legal system that was often slow, flawed, and re-traumatizing. Despite the momentum of the Me Too movement, backlash and resistance remained, subtle in some cases, blatant in others. For many, the end of Weinstein's career was symbolic, but not conclusive. His case became a lightning rod for broader discussions around gender, consent, and institutional power, not just in film, but across politics, media, and corporate environments. The ripple effect encouraged people from all industries to come forward, challenging long-standing norms and initiating overdue conversations about workplace ethics and respect. While Weinstein's fall was a historic moment, it also served as a sobering reminder of how much work still lies ahead. The women and men who came forward didn't just seek justice for themselves. They fought to ensure that future generations wouldn't have to navigate the same minefield of silence, fear, and exploitation. And though the path forward remains long and complex, the voices that were once silenced have now reshaped the narrative, turning pain into power and setting a new standard for what is no longer acceptable. Harvey Weinstein's 2020 conviction was initially celebrated as a watershed moment in the fight for justice for survivors of sexual harassment and abuse, particularly within the entertainment industry. It marked the first time such a powerful figure had been successfully prosecuted in the wake of the Me Too movement, and for many it felt like a long overdue triumph. Weinstein was found guilty of third-degree rape and first-degree criminal sexual act, and while the verdict did not encompass the full breadth of the allegations against him, it symbolized a shift, proof that even someone as influential as Weinstein could be held accountable. But the legal victory was short-lived. In 2024, a New York appeals court overturned the conviction, citing procedural errors during the trial, and in doing so, reignited a firestorm of outrage, disappointment, and heartbreak for the survivors who had courageously come forward. From the outset, Weinstein's legal battle was fraught with complexities. His defense team had relentlessly worked to undermine the credibility of his accusers, attempting to paint them as opportunists or participants in consensual relationships, rather than victims of manipulation and abuse. The trial itself became a battleground where past relationships, emails, and blurred professional boundaries were dissected and debated. While prosecutors built their case around a clear pattern of coercion and abuse, the defense insisted that the interactions were transactional, consensual, and misunderstood. The conviction, when it came, felt monumental, but the appeal process exposed just how precarious such a win could be in the legal arena. The court ruled that the inclusion of testimony from women whose allegations were not part of the formal charges had potentially prejudiced the jury. These testimonies, though powerfully illustrative of a broader pattern of abuse, were deemed by the court to have compromised Weinstein's right to a fair trial. The decision to overturn the conviction was devastating for survivors who had already endured the emotional and psychological toll of testifying. For many of them, the original trial had felt like the final step in reclaiming their voices and restoring some sense of justice. To see the conviction reversed on what felt like a technicality only deepened the wounds. Public reaction was swift and visceral. Advocates, survivors, and supporters of the Me Too movement condemned the ruling as a failure of the justice system to protect the vulnerable and punish the powerful. Though legal experts were quick to clarify that the court's decision did not negate the truth of the women's testimonies, it did serve as a stark reminder of how challenging it is to secure lasting accountability in cases of sexual violence, particularly when the accused is rich, well-connected, and backed by an elite legal team. Weinstein's attorneys celebrated the reversal as a victory, arguing that the initial trial had been compromised by emotional appeals and external pressure from a public eager to see him punished. But for the survivors, the court's decision felt like erasure, a denial not only of their pain, but of the significance of the moment when their voices had finally been heard in court. Many reiterated publicly that they still believed in Weinstein's guilt, pointing to the overwhelming number of women who had come forward with eerily similar stories of intimidation, coercion, and assault. The legal setback may have shaken the foundation of the case, but it didn't shake their truth. The prospect of a retrial brought with it a new wave of anxiety and emotional strain. Survivors who had hoped to put the trauma behind them now faced the possibility of reliving it all again, cross-examinations, public scrutiny, and the uncertainty of another verdict. Yet even amid this renewed turmoil, many remained resolute. Weinstein's retrial, scheduled for 2025, represented another opportunity for justice, another chance to show the world that silence and fear would no longer be the default response to abuse. The case had grown into something larger than one man. It had become a symbol of the fight against systemic injustice and the resilience of those who refused to be silenced. The retrial promised to be another pivotal moment, both legally and culturally. Whether it would result in a harsher sentence or another conviction remained to be seen, but what was already clear was the survivors' unwavering determination to see it through. The impact of their courage continued to ripple beyond the courtroom, energizing advocacy for legal reforms and reinforcing the urgency of creating spaces where victims could safely seek justice. While Weinstein's fall had once seemed to signal a new era of accountability, the reversal reminded everyone just how fragile progress can be. But it also reignited the resolve of a movement that had already changed the world once and was ready to do so again. For many, the entire saga, from conviction to appeal, from heartbreak to renewed hope, underscored both the imperfections of the justice system and its potential for change. It revealed the hard truth that justice isn't always linear and that even the most resounding victories can be threatened by legal loopholes. But it also reaffirmed the power of collective voice, of survivors standing together in the face of fear and failure, refusing to let their stories be buried again. Weinstein's case may not yet be over, but its legacy is already written in the bravery of the women who refused to stay silent and in the cultural transformation they helped ignite. One courtroom, one story, one voice at a time. Harvey Weinstein's legacy is now inseparable from the global reckoning over sexual abuse, particularly in Hollywood. Once a titan of the film industry, Weinstein is now remembered as the face of a system that allowed predators to thrive behind a polished facade. His rise, dramatic downfall, and the legal storm that followed became a cultural shift, forcing the world to confront uncomfortable truths about power, consent, and accountability. Yet, his case remains just one chapter in a larger story, still being written by survivors demanding lasting change. Before 2017, Harvey Weinstein was seen as a kingmaker in Hollywood, a man whose approval could make or break careers. But beneath the accolades and red carpet glamour, he was allegedly using his position to prey on vulnerable women, leveraging their ambitions for his own gratification. His abuses, though widely whispered about, remained an open secret, shielded by fear, silence, threats, and a network of complicity that enabled his behavior for years. It wasn't until dozens of women found the courage to speak out that Weinstein's carefully constructed empire began to collapse. What followed was more than just the downfall of one powerful man. It ignited a global movement. Survivors across industries began to share their stories, and Weinstein's case quickly became a symbol of a much larger and deeply rooted issue. His exposure showed the world how power can be weaponized to silence victims, but it also marked a turning point in how society began to confront these long-ignored injustices. For the first time, the world was truly listening. Even after his 2020 conviction, Weinstein's story was far from over. The appeal, the reversal of his conviction in 2024, and the retrial scheduled for 2025 all serve as a stark reminder of how difficult it remains to secure lasting justice, especially when the accused holds wealth, status, and influence. Yet the very fact that a retrial is happening at all is a testament to the determination of the survivors and advocates who refuse to let the case fade into obscurity. Their persistence has kept the conversation alive, ensuring that Weinstein's crimes will not be buried beneath legal loopholes or public fatigue. His legacy now reflects not power or success, but the enduring struggle for justice in the face of systemic failure. His story illustrates just how daunting the legal process can be for survivors, particularly when going up against a figure protected by status and resources. The overturned conviction is a painful reminder that justice is never guaranteed, but the ongoing public reckoning signals how much the cultural landscape has already evolved. Following his exposure, entire industries were forced to reckon with their own complicity. Hollywood introduced new policies and promised change, but the deeper, more insidious power structures that once protected men like Weinstein remain resistant to reform. The collapse of the Weinstein Company stands as a metaphor for the breakdown of those old systems, but the rebuilding of something better, more inclusive, and more accountable is still in progress. Beyond Hollywood, Weinstein's case has reshaped the broader dialogue around sexual violence and accountability. Survivors are no longer just demanding justice. They are calling for transformation, from pushing for legal reform to challenging the way media covers allegations of abuse. Their voices have created lasting momentum. And while the emotional cost of speaking out remains high, their efforts are fueled by a vision of a future where these stories no longer need to be told. As Weinstein's retrial draws near, the question remains: will this be the moment that finally brings closure, or will it expose yet more institutional failures? Regardless of the verdict, the survivors who stepped forward have already left an indelible mark on history. Their courage, their truth, and their refusal to stay silent have shifted the narrative, not just around one man, but around an entire culture. Weinstein's name will forever be tied to disgrace, but the names of those who spoke out against him will be remembered as the ones who dared to change the world. Harvey Weinstein's case has forever changed the landscape of the entertainment industry and the wider conversation about sexual abuse, harassment, and power dynamics. His fall from grace, though long and painful, sparked a global reckoning that continues to shape the fight for justice. While the legal battles are far from over, the courage of the survivors who spoke out has empowered countless others to share their stories and demand change. Weinstein's legacy, now defined by his crimes and the ongoing legal process, serves as a reminder that true justice is a continuous pursuit, one that must never be abandoned.